Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Âtrium X Space. We have an exciting one here, Empowa. Welcome, Empowa, on stage, and we have Peyton here as well. So, Empowa, one of the OG Cardano projects that have been building for what feels like ages in crypto time. So, I'm excited to hear all about Empowa, the projects that they have launched, and what's the latest news. So, welcome, Peyton, and welcome, Greg.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Yeah, looking forward to giving everyone an update on what we've been working on.
It's good to see you here. I actually recorded a podcast about Empowa. I want to say, 4.5 years ago, and here you are still rocking it. So how have things been?
Yeah, of course it's been a journey. As with all things real-fi, and in the kind of the real-world asset space, the speed of blockchain doesn't always translate into the speed on the ground, but we've made some really strong progress, and I think some of the updates I can share today will demonstrate that at least in the affordable housing spaces where we're focused on, we're slowly but surely converting some pretty key people into believing that tokenization and some of the other things that we're looking to do with the Cardano blockchain are the future and a way to solve what is a significant challenge, affordable housing in developing markets.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. For everyone here, make sure you tweet out the space as well, so we get a good crowd in here. Peyton, do you want to do some short news topics, or do you want to dive right into it?
Yeah, let's do some news. I think I enjoy our short news segments every week. We do a little bit of news before we get into the projects that we have on every week, and it's been an exciting week so far. What do we have, Stephen?
So we have a few topics. IOG released information about their Cardinal protocol, which is their implementation of the Bitcoin Cardano bridge together with BitVM. So they released a white paper type of document that outlines how it works, and they did a proof of concept already. I think moving over an ordinal or something from Bitcoin to Cardano. So excited to see a second technical implementation besides Bitcoin OS of the Bitcoin Cardano transactions. And then we have the off-chain treasury withdrawal vote that closed. Intersect was polling how DREPs would like to handle the proposal submissions for treasury withdrawals. And it seems like the winner was 39 individual budget proposals, withdrawals requests. So we'll see how Intersect implements that. And the second highest was two support brackets with two withdrawals each, which got 30% of the votes, and the 39 individual proposals got 42% of votes. So that's the highest bucket there. And then another one, it seems like every week we do this updates. We have some news from the SEC at the moment. So they released some information about how they see DeFi going forward, at least from the SEC's point of view. And one of the things they discussed would be they're looking into a DeFi innovation exemption to be able to bring products and services on chain and to market faster, which sounds pretty amazing, honestly. If there are some innovation exemptions for DeFi protocols to launch their offerings, sounds good actually.
Yeah, some great news there. It was definitely interesting to see, what DREPs chose, 39 individual withdrawals. I mean, that's what I personally, voted for, but I was honestly going to be okay with whatever the DREPs decided ultimately. So for people that haven't been paying attention, there was an off-chain vote using, I may pronounce this wrong, Ecalesia. And using this tool built by Adam Dean and Matt Orchestra, essentially DREPs voted on what proposals they would like to be included in a intersect budget. And I think there was 198 different proposals in there. Of those 198, DREPs approved. Off the top of my head, I think 38 different proposals, or 39. And now the DREPs are voting on how should these actually be submitted. There was an info action that was posted probably about 3 weeks ago now, and that info action essentially would approve the ability for these proposals to submit withdrawal requests to the Treasury. And this process is being followed directly from the Constitution that's been submitted on chain. And Intersect is kind of querying the community. How should we do these Treasury withdrawals? Should we bundle all of the proposals together because the DREPs have already voted off chain? Should we split these into different withdrawal brackets? Or should we just submit all 39 individual withdrawal requests directly on chain? And using this off-chain voting mechanism, they've decided that they want 39 different withdrawals, which is quite interesting. So we're going to keep giving you guys governance updates as they come out. I think that there isn't really a good resource for governance information, so we'll always spend a few minutes each week keeping you guys up to date with what's going on Cardano governance. As far as the SEC announcement, I mean, it's incredible to see. We went from an administration in the United States that was essentially stating if you do anything in crypto, it's illegal, it's security, we're going to put you in prison. And we're slowly seeing kind of the onion being peeled that I think is eventually going to allow for better regulation in the United States. And my hot take over the past couple of years has been that due to the SEC's actions and due to the United States government's lack of clarity in our industry, it's led to a lot more scams. If you can't have legitimate folks, register, in a proper jurisdiction and have proper compliance, it's impossible for people to operate legitimate businesses. So what you're left with is useless scams. And that's this is why I think meme coins really came to rise. Of course there's great communities out there that have really maximized what you can do with a meme coin, but there's also 99% of them are just blatant scams that offer no utility because jurisdictions state that you can't actually offer utility. So I think that we're seeing a slow and subtle change in the background when it comes to regulation that will lead to clarity, which will ultimately lead to better projects in our ecosystem and other ecosystems. And my hope is it leads to less scams, less people losing their money. And, with proper regulation and clarity and some damn good education, we're heading towards a better future for our industry and hopefully for the world.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. So yeah, let's dive into Empowa. A lot to talk about there. So yeah, Greg, I'm sure most people know, but can you give a very short introduction to Empowa? What the purpose is, what you're building?
Absolutely. So Empowa's real focus is on improving access to affordable housing. We think that doing that is not only great for the impact that it makes, but actually a really viable, sustainable, and potentially profitable business. Our focus historically has always been on the African continent, where recent studies have suggested there's a backlog of about 50 million homes. So there's a real untapped market. And it's to understand what we're really trying to solve, it's useful to understand some of the challenges across the continent. So Mozambique, which most people will know as our first test market, is a country of around 31 million people. But before we entered the market, there were only 600 home loans in the country. That's 600 in the entire country. A home loan had never been placed outside of the capital, Maputo. And the reason for that is that around 85% of income across the African continent is informal. And a mortgage really assumes formal income. So for anyone here who's had to apply for a mortgage, you know that the bank wants a whole bunch of documentation to prove your income, and they want to know that on a fixed day each month, the 25th of the month, they can debit your bank account with the same figure for the next 30 years until you've paid off the home. Now, if you work in the informal sector, it's often quite challenging to be able to demonstrate how much you earn. And it's also quite hard to predict how much you're going to have in your bank account on any one day. You know you'll have the funds, but you can't be assured that a salary is going to come in on the 25th. And so one of the innovations we've done, now this is not a blockchain innovation, but is to introduce the concept of rent to own as a method for paying off your home. So what does that look like? Our tenants on the ground commit to paying a set rent each month, and then they can pay down the capital, the equity in the house, ad hoc. So when they have access to funds. Now there is a defined period, and there is certain milestones they need to hit, but it allows them to pay kind of as and when they have access to capital. So imagine you're an Uber driver who, 1 week you have a good week, the next week you have a less good week, the next week you have a good week. You can be contributing on multiple occasions to paying off your home. As long as you make that fixed rent payment, that's a non-negotiable. Now, that rent-to-own model is something that we partner with local property developers to introduce. So we provide the funding to the developer, who in turn can provide this installment style package to tenants. It helps the developer to sell more homes more easily because they have a bigger market to reach. We have the loan with the developer, so it's a B2B contract. So we're dealing with one party on the ground, and they in turn are responsible for collecting kind of all the funds from their respective tenants. Now, as Empowa, we have built a series of software that allows this whole process to be tracked and to be tracked on chain. So that brings a heightened level of transparency to the flow of capital, which is important when you're talking to investors, because sadly, far too many have been burnt by investing into housing projects across Africa and seeing that money squandered. So they get transparency of the flow of capital. We also allow that investment to be tokenized, which means that now an organization can invest in part of a project and also trade that. And so it brings liquidity, which again reduces the perceived risk because now they can either exit or increase their position if they need to during the duration of the loan. And finally, we over collateralize the loan that's placed with our token. So what has often happened when investing into affordable housing in Africa is that the house is the ultimate collateral, and that remains true. So if there's default, the house can be repossessed to settle the debt. However, unlike a house in New York or an apartment in New York or in Amsterdam or in London, that asset may not be as liquid. It's not like we're going to be able to liquidate that in a couple of days due to the nature of property markets just being a lot slower to transact. So often the potential delay in receiving some of the funds back is what drives these incredibly high interest rates. So in Mozambique, before we entered the market, the interest rate on a home loan was 27%. Now, I'm sure anyone listening on this call would not be able to service a home loan at 27%. And that's why so few are placed. So what we look to do is to get our developers to lock up a certain percentage of the loan in our token, which is going to over collateralize the loan. So again, if they, let's say as an example, they're borrowing $100,000, and let's say we've agreed with them that they need to put down a deposit of say 10%, that 10% is then secured in our token, which means that it's, obviously hopefully long-term, more stable than emerging market currencies. It obviously is more easily moved around and sold, because many developing countries have exchange rate controls. It also gives them a buy-in into our ecosystem. And so now we can go to investors and we can say, your loan has the property as a collateral, as well as this additional deposit in our token. you have visibility of real-time payments on the blockchain, so you know that the money has been received by the tenants, and your investment is tokenized so that it allows you to, within our marketplaces, trade that to potentially other institutional investors and hopefully retail investors, as kind of regulation allows. And to your point, Big Pay, that's exactly why we are so excited about some of the developments that are happening in places like the States, because that does set the tone for markets globally. So yeah, bit of a long synopsis of the project, but hopefully everyone's kind of on the same page broadly now about how Empowa works.
Awesome. I appreciate your ability to speak about this so clearly for an extent of time. Sometimes we have to kind of really bring it out of some of the projects. You did a great job so far. So one thing I'm curious about is, when I first did the podcast with you guys, about 4 years ago, it was really just a concept and an idea at that time. How many people actually have houses on the ground? How many tenants do you guys have on the ground at this point?
Yeah, so in Mozambique, we're up to about 34, 35. So that's still a relatively small market. In Kenya, we're waiting for the completion of a project that will see around 50 tenants moved in by the time they're completed. So the numbers are actually still relatively small. I mean, what's ironic is that in Mozambique, we often like to jokingly say we increased the home loan market by 5%, which always sounds super impressive until you realize the market was 600 and we did 30. But what we've really done with those kind of now almost 80 something homes is to start to pilot to pretty key individuals, or not individuals, institutions, that this concept can work. And unfortunately, innovation happens a lot slower kind of in the real world. I like to say it happens a lot slower, especially in emerging markets, especially across the African continent. But there is a desperate hunger to solve this problem. And so now, even with the modest results that we've achieved over the 4 years, we're starting to really, and I can touch on this with some of the strategic partnerships that we've already announced or that I'll share on today's call, starting to unlock the potential for much bigger investment. I really enjoyed what you were saying at the start of the call around how some regulatory clarity will really help innovation. And that's definitely been observed. If I can't begin to explain how much the conversations have changed since the new administration in the States. Before we would be speaking to large institutions who loved what we were doing, but were anxious about exploring the use case of blockchain. Now they're excited. They're feeling very optimistic about the technology, and they're less concerned that they're going to start working on a project or putting money into a project that might be deemed now as illegal or security or get them into trouble, etc. So yeah, we're, the obvious big one is the NSE, so the Nairobi Securities Exchange. That's a project that I can definitely expand on, but that's the Kenyan Stock Exchange, where, we're looking to bring a solution to the market that is powered by Cardano, and that, as you can imagine, is designed to raise far more capital and therefore deploy far more homes. I'm in Kenya. We're also doing some stuff in Nigeria, and actually some updates in Mozambique as well. So hopefully this is the year where maybe we don't exactly go from tens to thousands, but maybe tens to hundreds, and then quite quickly to thousands and ultimately tens of thousands of homes.
Well, honestly,
oh, sorry, Stephen.
Oh no, I was just going to say, considering the challenges that you face, as you said, many of these types of projects in Africa have not worked out. So the fact that you have been able to make it work in 2 different countries is not a small achievement. So the proof of concept is very important here, and you have to start small. If you go too big too fast, you open up yourself to additional risk as well, I guess. And I mean, the numbers are staggering. 51 million people and 600 house loans. That's just, that's crazy. I mean, that's that's ridiculous.
Well, I mean, just to give you another absolutely ridiculous stat along the same vein. So Kenya is Africa's third largest economy. There's 55 million people, but only 27,000 home loans. So again, 27,000, much bigger than 600, but we're talking about Africa's third largest economy. It goes Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya. And you think to yourself, in the third largest economy on the continent, 27,000 home loans, it's crazy. And when you hear these numbers, you realize the opportunity, because we're not in the business of trying to house the homeless. I mean, I would love that to be a reality, but it's very difficult to make a sustainable business model, off the back of that. That's, I suppose, where NGOs and charities can really come to the fore. We're talking about taking what would be the working middle class anywhere else in the world and providing them access to secure, safe homes. If we think, again, if I just reference Mozambique as an example, the area in which we are focused is an area called Beira, which is very cyclone prone. A couple of years back, one of the largest cyclones pulled through Mozambique, and around 70% of the housing stock was destroyed. The reason why there's such a high rate of damage is because many homes are self-built. So people will save up, build a little bit, save up, build a little bit. And unfortunately, when you do that, often it's built with the cheapest possible building materials and not built to code, because these are not professional builders. So the cyclone came in, people's homes were destroyed. And unfortunately, not only did they lose their home, but they lost all their possessions in their home, all that savings, everything basically back to square one. Our homes, are climate smart, and so climate resilient, and it's a big focus for us. And so probably now a year, 18 months ago, a cyclone that was even larger than the previous cyclone pulled through Beira. There's some videos and footage of it on one of our blogs, and proud to say that our homes withstood the cyclone and were completely unaffected. What is the most maddening about this story is that when I spoke to the building team and said, how come these homes survived the cyclone so well, it came down to a type of screw that was used for the roof that was a couple of dollars per house. Not much more than $15 or $20 total cost to make this, to secure the roofs correctly with this correct bolt. I'm not part of the building team, so I'm not exactly sure on the details. But it just goes to show you that a simple lack of knowledge and a small cost can really make a big difference. And so bringing well-built, climate-resilient homes to the market has a huge social impact, but also makes the houses very easy to sell. And that's why developers are really interested in working with us, because they say, okay, our homes will be much easier to sell, if we go with this model, then, if we're having to build them to the lowest possible spec and try and sell them to people for cash, for example.
I saw that you guys actually have a mobile app that you've developed. Is that already live, or the tenants using this app to service their payments for rent?
Yeah. So in Mozambique, not yet, though it's in the works. Mozambique, from a kind of digital adoption, is much further behind. Kenya, we're tooling it for Kenya now, but the app that you see, which is live, was built for our launch now in Nigeria. So that is live, and people will be able to make their payments through the Empowa Pay app. We're doing an interesting approach in Nigeria, a very small tweak on kind of the standard business model that I just outlined. And that might be interesting for listeners to get some more details on. So what is very prevalent across the continent, but particularly in Nigeria, is this idea of co-ops or cooperatives. Now, typically co-ops will be a collection of people who have something in common. There might be a co-op for dentists, or a co-op for people working in the transport industry, or teachers or nurses, or whatever their focus might be. And typically people will save as part of that co-op, and then the co-op can either go out and negotiate better deals for them. So you could imagine them going to the likes of a World Mobile and saying, give us a preferential package for all of our members, because they have this huge marketing audience. Or they use the savings collective of all their members to allow different members to access more affordable finance. So for those who kind of have been following our project, you'll see that Glenn and myself spent a lot of time in Abuja earlier in May. And there we were partnering with effectively the governing body for property or housing co-ops in Nigeria to bring to market an Empowa-powered solution. So ultimately, what will start to happen is that co-ops will use our set of tools to start to collect payments from their members. So that will be done through the mobile app, as you've said, have that recorded on chains. That's valuable for the members themselves to know for certain that their funds are being saved correctly, and also useful for investors to see the saving patterns of the members, and then to ultimately use all the money saved as well as external investment to approach developers and secure affordable housing at a larger scale. So if we can go to a developer and say, we have this co-op, R10 as an example, which is one of the co-ops. So we have R10, they have 50 members who have saved the X amount already. We would like to get them into 50 affordable homes on a rent-to-own model, and we have the funds to enable that. Then that developer can almost build to spec, or at least can apportion some of their project for those members. So that's a really interesting use case, because it's almost like the co-op themselves are the financier, as well as the partner managing the tenants on the ground, as well as the marketing channel. And so that software for the developers, for the co-ops to use, is live, is ready. We're currently meeting with co-ops like every day, showing them the platform, helping them to understand the use case and onboarding them. And so we're looking forward to having hard to predict exact numbers because they're all going through a sales funnel, but starting to really onboard significant numbers of these co-ops to use in our Empowa solution to have their members start to save. And then as their members save, any fees that are generated by us Empowa go back to buying our token. And we're also talking to the co-ops about already starting to save taking a portion of the savings and putting that again into our token, so they already have that collateral that's needed for international investment. So an interesting model, largely all the same fundamentals, but just slightly tweaked for the realities of Nigeria. And that mobile app is being used by tenants on the ground.
Awesome. You hinted at some strategic partnerships and got me a little excited. So what do you guys have on the forefront there?
Yeah, so maybe to kind of just to reiterate some of the ones I've already touched on, but just to explain them in more detail. So as I just said, in Nigeria, we're working with effectively the governing body for the co-ops of Nigeria, the housing co-ops of Nigeria. So that's our route to market. So we've kind of been sanctioned by them as an approved digital tool for them to digitize their approach. And so that's definitely helping us with a lot of credibility speaking to each of those co-ops. We actually some again people might have seen, we recently had a token audit which we made public. That was part of the steps to get our projects and our token approved by the Nigerian SEC, because as part of everything I spoke about, we'll be looking to list on Nigeria's largest regulated centralized exchange. That's going to be required for us to be able to more easily move our token in and out of Naira. In and out of Naira. So that's the partnership in Nigeria. And again, it's interesting because blockchain and crypto and everything was completely banned in Nigeria, and now again with regulation changing abroad, they're really starting to open up to that. Then in Kenya, again, we've touched on our our project with the NSE, so the Nairobi Securities Exchange. That's part of a catalyst proposal that we put in, where we'll be looking to build a platform for right now tokenizing affordable housing. But we have built it in such a way that it can be used for tokenizing other assets that the Nairobi Securities Exchange will start to offer to investors and to local development partners to kind of help them raise capital for their housing on the ground. And that will be powered by Cardano. Where we are with that project is the platform itself is actually largely built. We're just getting some feedback and making some tweaks based on feedback from the NSE themselves and from some of their clients. We're now on a roadshow to both developers, getting them to already start to list their properties, and to potential institutional investors to get them to deploy in that first, that first launch fund. And that's going well. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of meetings with C-level executives and getting them to understand exactly what they invest in. But with the NSC at the table, it really does help, and that's their business. Their business is capital raising, so we feel like we're in good hands. And there's been some work being done with their local regulatory body to get a sandbox to at least test this in. But there's a lot. So I can get into it, but there's a lot of support from a government perspective around affordable housing in Kenya. So they really get in a lot of pressure to make sure that they set up something that allows foreign investment into the affordable housing space. And then in Mozambique, I was there with Marie and Glenn running a workshop for an organization called the ILO, which is a subsidiary of the United Nations, and a development bank, a large regional development bank called GAPI, who helps to manage the deployment of funds from the likes of the UN and the World Bank in the region. And that week-long workshop was really, again, about onboarding them onto our system. So this is maybe not as known publicly, but there'll be more details to follow shortly. But yeah, the GAPI will be the first real large financial institution to be making use of the Empowa full suite of software, and using that to deploy funds from ILO and the UN into Mozambique. So the exact details of all of that, we lining up a press release for that, but suffice to say that that's a really interesting partnership for us. The first project there, again, will be relatively modest, kind of given how much funds could potentially flow. But again, that's a route to much more substantial investment if or when that goes well, right? So as always, all these institutions, they want to kind of, crawl, walk, run, and we appreciate that. So we help them to kind of deploy a bit, see that the tenants move in, see that the tenants make their payments, deploy more, and kind of scale from there. But fortunately, in the case of especially this relationship, there's a much bigger checkbook to tap into than we're used to. So that's quite exciting for us.
Yeah, it sounds a great list of partnerships, I must say. So I'm curious for, if you can explain how a new housing project gets started, from basically ground zero to people, tenants having signed, I guess, an agreement or something, or a contract, and making their first payments. How does that look? How does that work?
Absolutely. So what is very important to understand is we do not finance construction. There's a huge risk in when you finance construction, and so we stay away from that. What we do is we find developers, or developers find us, when they are near the end of construction or are ready to start marketing their homes to the public. Now, in a functioning mortgage market and a functioning property market, what would typically happen is you would build a home, you would market it to people, they would come and purchase those homes using a bank mortgage, and the bank would then settle the funds with the developer, who would settle their construction finance, and the tenant would pay off their mortgage over 20, 30 years. Because there isn't a mortgage market, that isn't possible. And so developers often struggle to sell their affordable housing because they need to find people who have all that money in cash, which is obviously really, really challenging. So A developer comes to us, they say, we have a development of 30 units. We've sold 5 on installment sales ourselves, having the person paid off over 6 months. We've sold 10 to people who have cash, but now we got whatever's left over, 14 homes that we want to do on rent to own. We enter into an agreement with the developer where we will pay a portion of that now upfront, and the remainder is collected in partnership with the developer using this rent to own contract, which in some cases can be 5 to 10 years, depending on the region. So let's say a unit's $10,000, maybe we pay out $6,000 or $7,000. Now that's used by the developer to settle their construction finance, and then the balance is collected each month by the developer in order through this rent to own contract, and then they pay back our debt and they get their funds back. And this can be profitable for them because they may also charge a premium to the tenant for giving them this period to pay it back. Before they can unlock that, say, $100,000 investment, they are required to, as I mentioned, collateralize the loan in our token. So let's say we've agreed based on all our variables a 10% collateralization rate, then they would need to go and buy, in the case of that, say $10,000 worth of EMP on the open market. What can sometimes happen is developers may not have access to all the money that they need to be able to buy that EMP on the open market. So if that's the case, they're able to go out, reach out to our community and ask if they can borrow the EMP from the community to meet their collateral requirement. So that is typically done by offering a collateral NFT with a return. So this has been done already, where we've raised, I think in our last collateral NFT, 3 million EMP from the market. And we basically said, this is required to help collateralize the loan to be able to secure that investment from the institution. What will happen is the NFT is purchased at a discount. So let's say all our NFTs are normally in 100 or 1,000, but let's say 1,000 EMP. So they're purchased for 900 in the example that we launched, and they're purchased by the community at 900, and we agreed to buy them back from the community for 1,000 a year later. So that's exactly what happened for the second collateral NFT. For the first and second collateral NFT, the first one's actually just already been redeemed recently, so everyone bought them for 90 or 900, and they recently had airdropped to them 100 or 1,000 EMP, which is basically their reward or their return for having supported the developer. The idea is always that the developer supplies as much of the collateral themselves. So we hope that over time, they can rely less and less and less on borrowing from the community and rather just buy it on the open market themselves. They have more of a vested interest. Okay, so the developer has now supplied their deposit effectively in our token. They've received their funds. They've identified candidates who can move in. Those candidates are captured in our system. We have our own scoring system called our rent to own score that evaluates the details supplied by the tenant to determine whether we think they're a good or not good fit for the contract. If they are approved by us as potential tenants, they move in and they start paying down their rent to own contract. Those payments are made through our system, so we have full line of sight into how things are performing. So even though our loan is with the developer, I can see at any given moment which tenants have paid, which tenants haven't paid, how far behind they are, how far ahead they are. And that acts as an early warning system. So if we were to see a development of 50 units, if we saw half the tenants not keeping up with their payments, even a smaller set, but let's say half we would know very quickly. And even if the developer was still making their coupon payments to us, we would know that something's at risk here. And so we could obviously then step in and say, listen, what's going on? Let's get involved. Let's, work out why things aren't performing. So that full line of sight is quite unique. Often when providing funding to a developer, you just give them the money and maybe you have to wait 12, 18 months to get audited financials, on how things are performing. And next thing you realize they haven't been getting their payments from their tenants and things haven't been going according to plan, and there's a whole bunch of disasters. But that's where blockchain and the visibility and the transparency really is a game changer, because now I can see in real time, these are how many payments we received this month, anonymized and admittedly, but I can obviously de-anonymize them using our platform. And I can say, okay, these 30 tenants, 28 have paid, no problem. 2 of them haven't paid. What's going on there? These people haven't hit their savings milestones. What are we doing about it? And we have had to in Mozambique replace one tenant who wasn't keeping up, wasn't hitting their milestones, so we could then, ask them to leave the home and have another tenant from the waiting list move in and take over the contract. So that's the full life cycle of a developer comes to us, wants to offer the solution, all the way through to the tenant makes payment. And then the funds that are collected from the tenant, those are the funds that are used to repay the institutional investor who financed the property, as well as pay back, if the community was involved, their returns for loaning their EMP.
I personally think that it's incredible to see what you guys are doing. Just
Thank
of course, like 38 likes on a Twitter post isn't much, but 38 people, in the real world that now have access and the ability to one day own a house from making payments to it when that isn't, available to them is incredible. I mean, it's actually changing the lives of people in the real world. And I truly do believe that this is what Cardano was made for in the first place. And as you said earlier, it takes a bit of time for the real world to kind of catch up with the push forward that's happening with technology. And we had Palm Economy on, I would say, about a month and a half ago, and Empowa, and then with what you guys are working on, and Palm Economy to me is kind of two of the reasons that I got into Cardano back in 2017 before Palm and Empowa even existed, and just to hear that you guys have actually worked with the Security Exchange Commission in Nigeria is just incredible.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
For the year.
I mean, to give you just very quickly some stats on that Mozambique pilot project, so we had a report commissioned by 60 Decibels, which is kind of an industry lead in consultancy that measures impact, which was obviously important for a lot of our traditional finance investors. And so we got some interesting feedback from that. Just to look at those Mozambique homes, we had 500 people apply for those homes that we were able to choose from. We obviously ended up choosing the 38. Of those, we had not one of those 500 people had qualified for a mortgage. They had all been rejected for a mortgage and then came to our scheme. We had a 98% in the first 18 months. We had a 98% on-time payment, right? With the 2% obviously catching those payments up, slightly after the date. We had 20 after 18 months. We had 20 on average 20% of the value of the home already paid back. Now, for anyone who has a home loan, again, admittedly, these homes are $10,000, but it's all relative, right? These people are earning substantially less. I don't know anyone who, after 18 months, has paid back 20% of the value of their home. When these people interviewed by 60 Decibels, and again, the report's available on our site, 40% of them had a financial crisis during the course of this first 18 months. So despite that, they were still able to keep up with their payments and start to save towards their home. So it really isn't a case that there's poverty that prevents people from being in their homes. It's often that the financial products that we make available to them just isn't fit for purpose. And again, if I asked anyone here to pay a home loan at 27%, I'm sure many of us would struggle to keep up with our mortgage payment. If I said you had to save up for your entire home in cash before you could move in, I'm sure you also wouldn't be able to live in the home that you're currently living in. And then, I mean, just anecdotally, some of these stories are quite like heartbreaking. A lot of our homes are women-led households, and one of the stories that came from one of the tenants when we asked her, how is she enjoying living in this new home? She said her favorite feature of this new home is that the front door has a lock. We said, what does that mean? She said, well, she had moved away from an abusive relationship, and previously her accommodation front door didn't have a lock, and so her ex-partner who would come home drunk, like stumble in and basically attack her, and so she lived in constant fear. And now these homes have security and a lock, and so this is like a game changer for her life. And when you hear those stories, you're like, that shouldn't really be, something that we're talking about teachers, nurses, fishermen, people who are full-time employed and have side house and everything. A lock on your front door shouldn't be the thing that you think is the most amazing thing about your house, but it is, and so yeah, that's really motivating, as you can hear, for the team to, even if it is slow going and frustrating. And I wish that Starlink was available in more parts of the continent, because some of the internet lines that I have to put up with on video calls, you make you want to pull your hair out. But it does feel worth it when you hear some of these stories getting fed back.
Well, I can't really see another way to accomplish the work that you guys are doing. Having the 38 proof of concepts, and using the blockchain technology, facing the transparency that's offered with the technology, and actually benefiting people's lives, I think is the beginning of something that can massively scale. Both for financial institutions that want to invest in something like this that's good for the world and good for the growth of the country, and also for better housing as well. I mean, the story you brought up about the nails, I've been hit with some hurricanes over the past
yes.
And, losing your roof in the middle of a hurricane, has to be the most terrifying thing ever. There's the wind you hear outside is terrifying, let alone
Crazy.
loud it would be with the rain, pouring in. So, I hope that the stronger building, with locks and better nails, and I hope that really sets a precedent, and the ability for institutions elsewhere in the world, and kind of more clarity around regulation. I really hope that this is a showcase for what crypto can do for people, and the case for how institutions can use crypto to for investments, and to also better society ultimately at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, this won't be a new idea to anyone, but money talks. So if you go to a developer and you say, listen, I'm going to help you sell these homes, but in order for us to raise the capital, the homes need to be climate smart, they need to be climate resilient, they need to have certain basic features. You can drive behavior. It's very difficult to encourage affordable housing developers to embrace, for example, green technology, when that is going to increase the cost, and they're already struggling to sell their affordable homes to the market. And understandably, the people in that segment are saying, well, I want a home, and I don't have the capacity to put solar panels on the roof and embrace green technology and stuff. So sorry, but I'm just going to build with concrete and whatever is available to me. So we're not going to drive affordable green housing if we don't make that a condition of capital, but then make that capital affordable. And so you very quickly get developers embracing really interesting technology when you say, I will, if you do this, I will help you get access to affordable funding. And that's possible because there's a lot of funding available, for example, for green tech or climate focused technology. And if we can connect that climate technology to local developers in a way that they can verify the impact that they're making, we can start to have people move into, climate smart, climate resilient homes that are affordable, and ironically are actually, for the tenant, better, because when we spoke about solar panels as an example, people's eyes glazed over. When we said those solar panels will ensure that you have reliable energy, even when there are power cuts, which are all too common across the continent. I'm South African. It's fortunately stopped more recently, but there were rolling blackouts and load shedding across Africa for almost a decade. Nigeria, there's also rolling blackouts. So being off grid is actually a necessity. But when you connect, hey, these solar panels, which will help you finance, allow you to get reliable energy, and so you won't be affected, and your fridge won't go off, and your food won't go bad, and you'll be still connected to the internet, and all of these things becomes a very interesting value proposition. So there is an appetite. It might not always be for going green. It might be for other more practical reasons. But doesn't matter. The result is the same. It's clean energy, and so yeah, I can go on for days about all of the stuff, but I think you get the idea.
Amazing to hear. So you discussed a bit already about, let's say, some of the blockers that came across your path for Empowa, like the regulatory clarity. But do you see any other blockers ahead for, let's say, a rapid future expansion of affordable housing in Africa?
Yeah. So look, I can't explain. I mean, when our token sale ended a week after Russia invaded Ukraine, I don't need to tell anybody what happened to blockchain and crypto at that point. It was funny. In the build up to our token sale, people were super excited to hear I worked in blockchain, and everyone wanted to talk to me at every dinner party about what I did. After that, crickets. And that's a little bit of what it was like on the institutional level as well. People were very anxious. FTX was collapsing. Everything was, everything in the news was bad and doom and gloom. And there were court cases against every major crypto project that just were kind of baseless, as we come to find out. The change in administration definitely has had a huge change in the types of conversations we have, and so that helps a huge amount. What is interestingly a challenge for us on the ground is finding high quality, affordable housing developers who can build at scale. Now, there's a lot of affordable housing developers, but if I go and say to them, build me 1,000 homes this year, they literally aren't able to do that. They do not have the the staff. It's just not possible. So we are really spending a lot of time trying to build a network of these smaller local developers who can do 20, 50, 100, 150 to try and get to the scale we need so that when the capital is deployed, it can actually go onto the ground and into homes. And so that's a challenge, but obviously one that we're tackling. And as more funding flows, these local developers can commit to bigger and bigger projects. So that will take some time. It's an interesting challenge to have. People want to build, people want to deploy money, but the amount of money they want to deploy is more than the amount of homes that can actually get built. And again, we don't do construction finance, so there's a bit of a lag time between that, but we're getting over it. I think, as always, we need some kind of SEC equivalent approval in Kenya and Nigeria. That's moving along smoothly, but as with all government organizations, they don't move at the speed of blockchain. So that's something we need to process. But I think where the pieces are obviously falling into place now, and as I said, we're quietly confident that we've been crawling. We're getting to a place where we can walk briskly, and it might be only next year that we're really running, but even showing some improvements, I think for our partners, for ourselves, and for our community is really important this year. So we're hoping to really push for the last 6 months and be sitting on the same call, hopefully at the start of next year, where we're not talking about tens of homes, we're talking about, let's say, hundreds of homes. That I think is a realistic goal for us, and then scaling from there.
Well, what we can do on the Âtrium side to support this mission is we're preparing to launch mainnet, and the first thing is profiles. What we can do is we can get you guys a free profile within Âtrium. the at Empowa file. And, over the next few months, you'll be able to, essentially drive users to Empowa
Brilliant.
by using Atrium. So
Thank you.
yeah, that's our big goal is to make crypto easy for people. Ultimately, we built an application that has 26 motion graphic videos that teach you how to use Cardano and make crypto easy for you.
Amazing.
And yeah, so as the clarity comes in the United States, and we see some positive price movement, and I think a lot of people are going to be asking, what is Cardano again? So we built a platform to kind of answer that question for them. And we want to drive all of those users to great projects that are going to have a real world impact. And we'd love to profile for you guys. Make the onboarding process easy for you in Atrium. And for anybody just tuning in, we host these spaces every Wednesday at 16 UTC. If you have any questions, leave a comment in the bottom right-hand corner. Feel free to request speaker and come on up. You always have a chance to, ask questions for projects. Next week, we're actually having on the Rare team. We have a booth this year at Rare Evo on August 7th. So if you guys want to come by and see us, are you guys going to be at Rare this year? It's a far flight for you.
Yeah. We haven't attended the last couple of years because it is a bit of a far flight. But I think now, especially with the possibility of more institutional and even retail support from the States, it makes sense to kind of show our face and try and build some of that network. So if we can line it up with some institutional investor meetings, then that seems like a worthwhile trip over the pond, as they say. So yeah, actually a good idea.
If you do make it out there, you'll have to come and say hi at our booth. Yeah,
of course.
Âtrium, learn more about Empowa as well. We're also going to be giving out some free tickets in our next space. So if you have any interest in going to Rare, now you may be able to get out there a little bit cheaper with a free ticket if you're one of our audience listeners next week. And we have an XP platform built within Âtrium. So with your profile, if you're a user, you can level it up. For engaging with your favorite projects in the Cardano ecosystem, whether that be on Discord or Twitter or just using Cardano on chain. And each week we give out an XP code to our audience to give them some XP in the Âtrium platform. What's the code this week, Stephen?
The code for the Empowa X Space is affordable housing with a space in between. So affordable housing.
Awesome. So if you type in affordable housing within Âtrium, you'll get some XP for your profile NFT this week. And I know a lot of people are excited for the mainnet launch of Âtrium. So I'll give you guys a brief little update. And again, if you guys have any questions for Empowa, make sure you comment them in the bottom right-hand corner or request speaker. We definitely want to have them on in the future as they have more positive developments. But on the Âtrium side, we're very close. We're going to be coming to you guys with a date soon. You'll see it in the Discord server. You'll see it on the Twitter account. But we have all of our smart contracts live on mainnet. We've been doing some testing with the moderators. I've had access to mainnet for a few weeks now. Our moderators have access as well. We're doing the final testing, for bugs. We're buttoning up on security, and we're preparing for mainnet. So as soon as we're 100% sure, we're going to put out a date for you guys, and the new era for Âtrium is going to begin, and that era is mainnet, which is what we've been working towards for the past 2.5 years. And the timing is really good, in my opinion. The team is really excited, and thank you to everyone that's helped us get to this point. We've had over 2,000 users, test our testnet over the past couple of years. We've had many bug reports, many, conversations back and forth, a lot of feedback that really has shaped the platform into what it is today. So, thank you guys. Thank you to the Âtrium team. Thank you to the moderating team, and thank you to the Âtrium community. We've got some really exciting times ahead. And I have a feeling that things are going to get a little crazier. So it's the calm before the storm, And we appreciate you guys tuning into the spaces every week. Doesn't seem like we have any questions, so thank you, Empowa, for being here. We want to support your project, through the Âtrium platform, and we also want to support it through the spaces that we host every week. And I also have an audience on my account. So when you guys have big announcements, if you need to drive some people to your platform, just shoot us a message. We're here to help. That's what we want to do, is push projects, doing things in the real world on Cardano out there. So anything we can do to help you guys, shoot us a message or a DM, and we'd be happy to facilitate that.
Awesome. No, thank you, and I appreciate the offer again for the kind of Âtrium profile. That's going to be really useful. I think, yeah, to everyone who's been listening in today, I really do appreciate it. We are a bit of an OG project, so sometimes that means that there's always shinier, new, exciting things happening in the Cardano ecosystem, and so that can obviously draw people's attention. But we do appreciate everyone kind of coming along for our journey and supporting us. It always blows my mind that after all this time, people still want to hear our story, and give us all the love that they do, and we're excited to reward that by making both the returns and the impact that we've promised. If anyone is likes what they hear and wants to try and get a little bit of exposure to the Empowa project, there is an LSPO that we've set up just to distribute some of those tokens that were unsold from our token sale all those years back because of how the crypto market fell off a cliff, and we wanted to make sure those got into users' hands. So that's one way to get some exposure without only forking over your rewards, I suppose, and not having to part with any of your hard-earned ADA. But if that's not something you want to do, follow us as always, like on X, join our Discord, join our Telegram, find out, stay tuned with the project, and we'll definitely be back here as often as you're willing to have us when we have some meaningful updates to keep your community kind of abreast with what we're achieving. I'm still excited to at some point during this year have the big Empowa and Cardano logo behind us and ringing the bell for the opening of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, something that I promised during our kind of campaign for Catalyst, and it's still something that's very much on the cards. So that'll be an exciting moment for both us and for the broader Cardano ecosystem when we can show to the world what Cardano technology can enable, both in the TradFi space, but also in the impact space. So stay tuned.
I like that you brought up the new and shiny thing in Cardano. Like, a lot of these new and shiny things, they're stars that flash and then they disappear. Whereas you guys have stuck it through all this time, and it's hard to in a innovative technology space to keep a business alive and progress as much as you guys had. So that's the last little pat on the back I'll give you, because it's not easy to stay around long and get through all of the hardship that I'm sure you guys have. So thank you everybody for listening in. Stephen, thank you for hosting.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Peyton and Greg, for joining. Another very interesting conversation. We'll also be uploading this to YouTube, so you can always reference back to it, Greg, whenever you feel like it. And yeah, thanks to everyone joining. Make sure you tune in next week Wednesday at 1600 hours UTC for Rare Evo, and we'll have some free tickets up for grabs for anyone that joins our space. So yeah, make sure you join in. See you guys next week. Bye.
See you next week.
Bye guys. Thanks again.